Lay. Sir. Yeah. Yeah.
Kane is in the building.
Yeah. Alright, already the show goes on all night. Till the morning we dream so long. Anybody ever wonder when they would see the sun? Just remember when you come to the show. What's up? Alright, already the show goes on all night. Till the morning we dream so long. Anybody ever wonder when they would see the sun? Just remember when you come to the show goes on.
Have you ever had the feeling that you was being had? Don't that shit that make you mad? They treat you like a slave, put chains all on your soul and put whips up on your back. They be lying through their teeth.
Hey yo, what's up everybody? Overseas Podcast, talking overseas basketball. Tonight we might switch gears a little bit. Not as much overseas talk tonight, so if you're like listening to this and you hate overseas basketball, find another show. But we're going to be talking to Jake Fisher, who's an author of the book How the NBA's Tanking Built to Lose: How the NBA's Tanking Era Changed the League Forever. Jake is also a very accomplished writer, writing for many different publications, Sports Illustrated, SB Nation, Slam, but this is his first book. So Jake is going to be joining us today to talk a little bit about tanking, because I have a lot to say about this, as I do with most topics. What's up, John?
What's going on, man? But first, we're talking writers today, and you're our writer, so let's get a little bit of a book update. There's been some movement here, so let's hit us with that news, man.
All right, so everything is just so fluid with writing a book, especially in this era. Especially being a first-time author and kind of coming from, I hadn't written in so long that, finding a publisher, kind of found one, kind of was in and out some meetings and, was like, well, let's try this and send us to someone else. And it was sent to someone else. And we finally had a publisher lined up, and it was just kind of, we were excited. But it didn't seem like it was like a really huge priority, and it was kind of like there was like still on the fence about it, just because it's overseas basketball. And we kind of met with my team, and I was like, you know what, how about we go to this one publishing company that's, a lot more profitable, but it's not really a publishing company that's going to blast it out to everyone. The marketing's not as good. And then we, like the guy Don Povia, who runs Transition Sports Entertainment, he's a marketing major, and he's like, how about we give it to them and then we just market the shit out of it. So that's what we've been doing. So right now it's scheduled meeting next week to kind of go over the cover that we're going to decide on. It's currently with the editor getting edited according to this publication, and then it's going to be released pretty soon after that, and it will be available digital copy. So we'll have a pre-release date, hopefully next episode. That's what I'm hoping for.
That's awesome.
So it's crazy. It's nuts. It's like such a long process.
You're going to look back on this in like a year. You're going to be like, have your next book ready. I know you said we're working on a little something in the chat. Not ready to like talk about that one yet, but you're going to look at this in another year and be like, wow, the distance we've come. We should be like archiving this, like on such and such said, this is what happened. And then, you know what I mean? Because I think you're going to look back and really relish in the work that we've done.
It will be really good if it was really successful. And it will be funny, not funny, but like very depressing if we look back and we're like, wow, that book like fucking tanked. And we're like, oh, remember how excited they were? And then, but I'm hoping for positivity. Positive vibes only, John.
It's a new year. We're going to try and stay positive. Good things
Positive vibes. That's it.
We're getting more viewership by the episode with the podcast. I see you're rocking the overseas merchandise. I dig it.
I am. I thought long and hard about this today too. I was like, should I rock the gear today?
Yeah.
And I remember, and it's funny because we like switched off because you were rocking it last week, and I was like, I know. And now you're wearing like normal clothes, and I'm wearing like at least one of us is wearing it all the time.
I'm waiting to get my my hoodie.
I know. I'm getting. And the hat too. I have like the hat is sitting in my car. I just have to drive it to your house. But I was like, I'll wait until I get the hoodie, and then I was just like,
nice,
because I
Well,
haven't
then,
gotten over there.
Anne
Oh,
Marie,
well, we'll see each other next week.
that is true. We will see each other next week with school going back. But Anne Marie saw that I ordered the green hoodie, and she ordered one as well. So
I
she
saw that. I was like, what?
she was like, I want one. So listen, man, it's never too late. We got Valentine's Day is coming up, everyone. Overseas
This is
famous
true.
here. Get it going. Order now.
Seriously.
With the way the
What better way to say I love you than an overseas famous hoodie?
Yes. Well,
Just tell them how famous you think they are far, far away from here.
we joked about this though, and she said I could tell it when she first saw that we changed the name to Overseas Famous. So if anyone, my new fiance Anne Marie, she's Korean, so she thinks it's funny because she's gonna wear this Overseas Famous thing, and it's gonna be like she's Overseas Famous because she's fucking Korean. And then what was the other thing that you were playing with your merchandise?
Oh, like it's a T-shirt. Just says it says imported, like because that's what they call like basketball players who are American overseas. It's like, oh, you're an import, like you're an import, so it's like imported. So and I got a few other styles that are they're in the work, so it's cool. Good times. All right, let's rock and roll. Let's bring Jake in here.
Let's get Jake in, and we'll see what he has to say. Maybe he'll have some advice for us moving forward.
Jake's also been on hold for 14 minutes, and I wrote him at like 13 minutes ago. I was like, "Hey, little Jake, we're alive. I promise. This is not. What's up, dude? I love the hair. Looks great.
You. It's been a quarantine thing. We'll see if it sticks around, but for now, we're having fun with it.
Yeah, I like it. It looks great.
Thank you.
So, Jake Fisher, author, writer. We already kind of went over your stuff when we introed.
Appreciate it.
It's awesome. So Jake and I, like I was telling John, like we knew each other from way back then when I was still playing at the time, and I was doing basketball, and you were coming in and training because Jake was a very good basketball player, so he was coming in and playing, so and training. So it was like we knew each other for a long, long time. So this goes way back. So I'm excited to that's why I like the hair. It's like it looks good, man.
Man, your hair. Your hair. You got the product going. You got the high.
Yeah, it's But listen, I don't even know. I it's all Pinterest. Everything I do is just going on Pinterest every day, and if it looks good, I'm just like, cool.
We gotta hire a makeup and hairstylist for you when we start.
Yeah, this is true.
Our social media. I'll be the producer, and next up, we're gonna get a hair and makeup artist. That's next.
That's what. Yeah, hopefully they'll fix the fucking bags under my eyes, but we'll get there eventually.
Listen, man, if you said it's Pinterest, but if it's the internet, I'm going to trust you because, listen, you're not going to remember this, but when you were subbing for one of my classes in high school, and I remember you had your Waiting for Godot blog on blogspot.com.
Yep.
I wanted to start my own blog, and I did. It was really terrible. And I was reading through you were hyperlink. This was like in the beginning when hyperlinking was like big for SEO, like when we all started realizing that. And I didn't know how to hyperlink in the article, and I asked you how to do that, and then you gave me this whole like back behind the scenes like how to work blogspot.com. This like email, or I don't know how you got it to me, but it was a big help along the way. So appreciate it.
It's crazy. I remember talking to you, and I was telling John this. I was like, we had a conversation because you said you wanted to get into like blogging, and I was doing the thing. And I've discovered that I didn't know anything about anything. Like I just learned by doing.
Figure it out.
Yeah, let's just learn by doing. So I was, and then it was awesome because Jake obviously, started off. You wrote for Slam, you wrote for SB Nation, huge, great articles for Sports Illustrated. Jake was writing for Sports Illustrated, and the book, Jake, is like super interesting to me. I'm like,
thanks, man.
Because as soon as it's all about tanking, Built to Lose, and how the how tanking is kind of like taking over the league, which is crazy. So kind of talk to us about the book, and let's just get to the whole nitty gritty of the book first.
Yeah, I really, this thing started because, I'm from South Jersey, grew up in Cherry Hill, went to Sixers games, was a huge Sixers fan my whole life. And as I started becoming, a professional journalist, your biases start to. This is branching on a subject that is a little bit too political, but whatever. I'm trying to hint at here. Eventually, I started having to look at teams objectively to do my job well. And it got really hard to do during Hinkie's process era because, as you guys know, it was so polarizing, right? You had people who were either all the way in, they believed in the process, they believed in Hinkie, people who thought it was a scam, thought that losing games is unethical, whatever you want to put, fill in the blank. And I used that experience to really, like, it sounds corny to say, but to kind of hone my craft and like figure out what my voice was going to be in that NBA space, right? And I always knew it was a story. Anytime I talked to anybody, meeting an executive, a coach, a player, whatever, and I would say I was from Philly. And I wear this Eagles hat a lot, like going to morning shoot rounds. And honestly, it's like a thing to have people like remember me by a little bit. And people would always talk about the process and talk about, oh, you're Sixers. And people would give me crap about it thinking I was still a Sixers fan. And I knew it was something. And to kind of hint on what you mentioned earlier about how tanking has really become something that's so precedent in the league, I really kind of realized when reporting this, we're in this superstar movement era, right? Where, James Harden just moved his way to Brooklyn pretty much. The league has now come down to chasing and maintaining stars, right? And that all starts with getting them in the first place in the draft. So I really think the tanking era, and a couple of executives I've talked to that they say at the end of the book, I think the tanking era that Hinkie really encapsulated, it wasn't just him, it was Boston. Remember, they traded KG and Paul Pierce.
Yep.
The Magic were bad for a while. The Kings were bad for a while. The Cavs after LeBron. The Wolves up there traded Kevin Love. That tanking era, I really think, propped up what we now see with all these stars basically saying, there's a guy over in that city. I want to go play with him now because they were told how important they were. I've been rambling so long. I'm sorry.
No, I love this. I'm intently listening. I want to hear.
These guys, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown now in Boston too. These guys have been propped up as these franchise saviors. These organizations are losing for years and years and years just to get these guys. Of course, when their free agency is up, they're going to think, well, I'm worth a franchise losing years of games in order to get positioning to get me. It just starts this cycle of empowering these guys to kind of have all the agency that they have now. That's my thesis.
It's a very true statement. I think the process definitely gave the power back to the players. And it's funny because I always look at it like from a player's point of view. I always thought about tanking, and I was so like, especially with the NBA, obviously, we always talk about. I've talked to a lot of guys, like those guys who play overseas. They're always at the end of the bench. You could switch and swap a lot of those guys, and they would just flip flop, and they would be fine. And
also in Denver this year.
Yep, exactly. And it's like. So there's so many instances where that could occur. So as a player from my point of view, guys who play overseas, I always thought tanking was like crazy because I couldn't, like, my job wasn't like, I couldn't tank. Like I wasn't a superstar where I could kind of be like, nah, screw this. I want to go here. I don't want like James Harden did where he's just kind of like packing on weight. And side note, Jake, I'm watching all these things, and I saw it on Barstool, and I texted my friend, and I was like, they showed that picture of Harden with the Rockets, and he would like look like a fat guy.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I texted my one friend, I was like, I think he's wearing a fat suit. I was like, there's no way that's what he looks like. And then they showed a picture of him there, and I'm like, do you think he would have wore a fat suit? Like, do you think has gotten to the point where he's like, F this, I am not playing here. Watch what I'm going to do. Like, look at these theatrics.
Well, my theory on that is he was wearing those new blue alternates they have, right? And remember a couple weeks ago, he looked really fit. It was in those same blue I think for whatever reason, that extra, like, maybe because, like you saw in the Nets picture, he was wearing all black, right? And then they have, like, the NBA, one thing I've learned from being inside locker rooms, there's so much free gear. So I think when those alternate uniforms come into play, they have like their regular stuff, and then they have like the blue alternate. And I think he just layered it up and added on a little pouch. That's my working theory.
I love that. That's a good theory.
Yeah.
I mean, there is like it's gear, so much gear. available in NBA lockers. That's why I'm always like anyone I know who works in the NBA, I'm just like, dude, you have to understand, like, the stuff that I still wear gear from when I worked out with the Sixers because like everything fits me. And now like it's like getting, it's like quality, it fits me. And now like I can't go to like, you know, the Gap and buy sweatpants. It just doesn't work like that. So.
I go into summer league every year. I've met a lot of younger guys in the league. I mean, I'm 26. I'm not going to be going out at night with Mitch Kupchak, you know. But a lot of them are in the G League. So I'm trying to collect the largest collection of authentic G League gear because especially some of these teams, like they change or like they're in a different market. So I'm getting extinct, rare, collectible material here. That's how I'm trying to gather up the biggest hoard of G League gear I can get.
Jake, I have like a huge box in my like attic that is just covered with like filled with all my old like Roanoke Dazzle gear.
Did you play in North Dakota Bison or something like that?
Yeah, it's like there's like so much stuff. I've like Roanoke Dazzle. And that's the only team I played for in the D League, but like that's like old school. That's like one of the original like 6 teams that are all now defunct. I think I'm pretty sure all of them are gone. But yeah, like collecting that G League gear, man. That's like. That's real, and I think that's like a cool thing. And we'll kind of talk about that because the G League, you've obviously, your interactions, like you said, you've known a lot of guys who played in the G League. Have you been? Do you spend a lot of time in the G League, like going to games in the locker room, like over the past few years?
Not a lot. I've been to a few. I checked out the 87ers when they were the 87er. Or no, they're still the 87ers. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
No, they're the Blue Coats now.
They're the Blue Coats. That's right. Okay.
And the Long Island Nets have a couple games every year in Barclays. And pre-coronavirus, I always check them out. Which I think the Nets, you know, obviously they're in the news a lot right now. I think one thing. It's really impressed me, like being up close with the organization, is the synergy and like how close that the G League compartment like is within that overall organization. Like I remember I went to a game. It was the Monday after the Super Bowl at 11 a.m. and it was mostly to like do one of those things where they get a bunch of it's like a field trip for school. I think
SpongeBob night. Yeah
exactly. And there were like 4 or 5 of the Nets like legit rotation players sitting courtside watching that game with like only 3,000 kids in the stands the day after the Super Bowl, which, you know, is like a national holiday of having a hangover and taking off.
Yes.
They were all there like up and supporting and like dapping up the guys that went back to the bench. Like they definitely and it's not going to be as important now.
Yeah.
They have KD and James in there chasing the title, but they were like building out that culture and like figuring out the fabric of what the new Nets were with Sean Marks and at the time Kenny Atkinson. It was impressive, and I've seen a lot of teams start to do that now. Like they send coaches down and they bring them back up. A lot of teams will keep databases on the players that they had in there. Like you'll see a guy who was in Sioux Falls in 2016, like come back in 2019 on a free agent deal because the coaching staff's familiar with that guy. Like a lot of teams, it's not the direct 30 for 30 affiliate that it's going to be, but it's made like tremendous strides the last couple of years for sure.
It really has, because I follow it very closely. Just because I spent, you know, part of my career there, and I always have like an affinity for it because it's the only reason I played professional basketball. I got like drafted and like later round, like 8th round, and was like, no, you're not going to make the team, and ended up making it and playing there for, you know, on and off for 3 years. Yeah. So it was, it's holds such a good place in my heart. And just like how, like you were saying, like how those random nights when 10,000 kids or like, you know, thousands of kids would pour into the arena and it would be packed. None of them cared about basketball at all. They were all like, no one was even cheering when we scored, but when SpongeBob walked out, everyone went nuts.
Yeah.
But like, that's what it was. And I think that just watching the growth and seeing like a real, like you said, like guys going and supporting, like it's not just the Nets organization, the Brooklyn Nets, it's like the Nets organization as a whole, which is really good to see because, I mean, we look at baseball and all of those different things. Like I know with the Phillies, you kind of saw the stars go through the organization. You saw Chase Utley's and Ryan Howard's and Cole Hamels like all roll through that organization, and like those guys, a lot of those guys played with them, and then they're going and support. It's like a whole family. Like you kind of know those guys coming up. It's just a lot different with basketball.
Yeah,
because you go into basketball, there's such a shorter shelf life.
Nobody does it better than the Heat. I mean, the Heat, they had Duncan Robinson, Kendrick Nunn, Chris. I mean, they really utilize the two-way deals like perfectly. They bring in guys who actually can contribute, and then they like exhaust the number of games and total days, whatever the terminology is now under this current setup. I have no idea.
Yeah,
I understand how they have the G League bubble, and now these guys are also. I haven't looked into that yet.
Yeah,
but it's happening. And the Heat. I mean, Duncan Robinson for a long time had played more games with their G League affiliate than he had the actual Miami Heat. Like that just goes to
crazy
what they do and the investment and the level of attention to detail they bring to develop those guys. The Heat really kill it.
That's awesome.
I'm surprised with what they just did last year.
Well, I'm like super excited that it's just becoming, because now I say I still call it the D League, so I like date myself. So I'm like, I played in the D League.
They will not be happy with you. They really want they want you to say G League. They're very key on that.
That's what I'm just like. So I'm like, I played in the D League, and they're like, wait, what? They're like, what's that? Like the dumb league? And so I'm like, no, it's like what the G League. And I try to explain it. I'm like, fuck it. I played in the G League.
Yeah.
So kind of going back into the tanking thing, because it's such a, like you said, it's such a polarizing topic. Like either you're so for it or you're so against it. And as a player, like I said, like I was never a tanker because, my contract depended on me being so successful in a game that like there was never even a thought process that like we're going to lose this game on purpose. And I think that's mainly the player's point of view is like you're not going to go and lose a game on purpose. Like no player, even if you're like the best player on the team, you don't have that drive to be like, let's just screw it so this rookie can come and eventually take my spot. Have you found that just talking to a lot of players?
Of course. Spencer Hawes really said it the most clearly, and he's the one who I have quoted in the book saying it, especially when you're a guy on the trade block, right? Like, you're not going to be like, it's not, I think his direct quote was like, it's not my job to help you get set up for how well you're going to be after I'm gone.
Exactly.
But the other flip side of it is guys like the G League guys who are on 10-day contracts, guys right on the doorstep of the league. They're there to grab their spot, right? Like look at a guy like Tim Frazier who came in. I don't know if you remember, he made his debut against the Celtics, and there's this cool story. I've written about it in the past, but he was like the main Red Claws, like MVP, All-Star, like best guard in the I guess it was the D League at the time. I don't remember. he was in Springfield, Maine, and Portland, Maine, and he got called up, and the whole Celtics like Red Claw staff had all gone to Boston already for his debut, but they all had the keys to get his shoes out of the locker room. So he went to the locker room, got locked out. He had to hop in whatever car that they, the car service they had. Luckily, he had spent training camp with Boston. He texted Avery Bradley knowing they had the same shoe size. And he wore, remember those old Audi like Roadster cars that look like –
Yeah.
Kobe had Adidas shoes modeled off of those. They're like bricks. They're like not like the quick fly wire shoes that we have today,
Yeah.
And Tim Frazier, that's what Avery Bradley wore to the arena. He gave the shoes to Tim Frazier, and that's when the Sixers had MCW and Jakar Sampson injured. MCW and Tony Roten injured. So Jakar Sampson started at point guard. Tim Frazier came off the bench wearing those thick Kobe's. He played like 35 minutes. He threw 10 assists. And he didn't stick around in Philly, but like he's been in the league forever because of that opportunity that team gave him. And he was not tanking. Like he was there to take his spot. And the flip side of that also, the thing that Hinkie did pretty uniquely from all the other teams I talk about in the book, he really mined that bottom of the barrel, for lack of a better expression. He really went in and looked at so many guys. I mean, how many guys did we see go through that franchise? A lot of people thought it was just him, kicking the can down the road, yada, yada, yada. But he really was trying to find a bunch of Robert Covingtons and a bunch of T.J. McConnells. And those guys a lot of players got a lot of opportunities to make their career and to be a Tim Frazier, to be a Covington or a T.J. McConnell, because they did that, which is pretty interesting too.
It is interesting because those years, you were right. Like, there's a lot of guys. Like, I joke with friends and stuff, and Tony Roten and Moultrie both ended up playing in Estonia on the team that I played for. So they were both at BC College Kramer, and I remember I was like, yo, and I would send them texts and be like, this is where, like, just so they knew that I was like, look, these were NBA players that we followed because they stuck around for a while. And these are guys that we followed, and they were playing in the same league that I was. So I was like, almost like a way to kind of, showcase myself and be like, see, I wasn't shitty like you thought I was. Like, I actually could play because, look, they're taking these guys. And but I think, like, going back to that time period, if that was, it would be nice if, like, you kind of played a little bit more longer, because I do think that that they were, like, pulling. There's a lot of teams pulling now from the G League. And back then, I mean, there were 6 teams. But it was like that. You always think about it if you played in a different era. But at the same time, I'm slow, and I was more of like a bruising guy. I played in that kind of like cusp of like when Shaq was kind of finishing up, and then quickness was taking over.
You were great in like 06.
Oh yeah, 06. That was like I think I was in Australia in 06. That was like my top year. Like 06 was like, that was my prime.
Yeah,
and then it just went downhill from there.
Australia is. I mean, I talk about it a lot, not to be a shilly guy, but I talk about it a lot with Brett Brown and his background there. Like, the culture in Australia basketball is pretty incredible.
It is.
And I mean, this kind of, I just think also about, you were saying about what time, like when you play, obviously the global basketball landscape has been completely rich. Like, there's like, to get a guy overseas now, or to get a guy to go play in Australia and sign him, and he's on your NBA roster in like 10, and obviously maybe not right now during COVID.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we've seen countless guys go play like the Australia season, and the big thing that's attractive for that, a lot of guys now, is the season ends in like March or something like that.
Yeah.
Sign and come back and play. It's never been more just like even to just jump around and end up around the country. So you maybe hit the marketplace a little too early for that.
No, it's like, but you're very right. Like, it's there's a guy, I was just trying to think of his name. Someone mentioned this morning. He had made his NBL date, like the national basketball like debut yesterday. His dad played in the NBL, and like every person I know a lot of people who currently are like announcers in Australia because they were players, and now they're like analysts and stuff, and they're all of them were talking about this one kid they're like, this kid's going to be like 100% drafted probably next year. So it's pretty cool to kind of see like there's so many guys who kind of come from overseas. And I always say, like, it's so hard to play professional basketball because you're not only as Americans, you're fighting against college guys, but like there's all these guys flocking in from overseas. It's such a cluster of guys that you got to beat out, and overseas market's really improving. And it's like, it's pretty cool to see.
I'd be curious to know, and there's no way to figure it out. I'd be curious to know what the like actual tangible impact has been from all these NBA academies. They're popping up all over India and Asia, and whatever the region with the Kiwis in Australia.
New Zealand, yep.
Well, no, they call it something. The NBA calls it like trans, like they have some weird like terminology. The NBA made it up. I don't remember what it's called. Like the Pan-Asian Australian something camp.
Okay.
The whole South Eastern Hemisphere,
Yeah.
I mean, Dante Exum and Vince, like they're just bringing kids up. And I mean, the Australian national team is like I think they rank in the top 10 easily right now. And
yeah. Because I'm trying to, I mean, who knows? Because, I mean, we talk about tanking, and, this is like, we always talk about like the tanking as a good thing, especially in Philly, as like Philadelphia fans. But like, shit, it's frustrating because like you tanked, and that's what I always think. Like, you got to tank at the right time too.
Yeah.
It's like I said, it's a process. Trust the process, but like you got to tank at the right time because there's drafts. Even the draft this year, it's like not a strong draft. There's not like the guaranteed superstar. So it's like those teams that tanked and got it right. I mean, they did it right. And like, you know, Embiid's a great player. He's obviously could be up for MVP this year, but like Simmons, it's like you're up and down and you have these guys are these superstars, but like you got to hit exactly right. Like you got to know exactly, okay, we're tanking this year because in 2 years, this guy's going to, there's a whole lot of extenuating factors going into tanking that like as a business, it's got to be tough to kind of gauge.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it comes down to a matter of chance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if the lottery wasn't a thing, and if you know it was as simple as just snap your fingers, we're going to put out the worst team we can, we're going to sink down the standings, get a high draft pick, the Knicks would have Zion Williamson, right? It doesn't go that way. And you can spend all these resources in your scouting departments, and you can, you know, put yourself in the position to have a good pick, to pick your guy, and if the guy doesn't work out, you're screwed too. So I think that it's so fascinating how, you know, every single year the top 5 prospects, right? They're these huge stars. You're seeing them interviewed everywhere. They're going to ESPN and doing the car wash, or they go to Around the Horn in the afternoon and whatever. They come to New York and they would go to the SI office. They would go to Bleacher Report. They would go to ESPN. They would go to ABC. They would like do something with Complex, and then they get drafted. And then unless they're stars, we never hear from them again, right?
Yeah.
That's the same thing what happens like on the ground. Like these teams have 10, 20 people dedicated full time to be scouting these ranks around the country, around the world, to figure out who's going to be the next, you know, Tyrese Halliburton fell all the way to 12. That's going to be a pick that, you know, the Kings just hired this new GM, Monty McNair, after they've been mired by all this crazy in-house controversy and this palace intrigue from Vivek Ranadive all the way down, right? They bring in this new GM. They're on the cusp of the playoffs, and potentially the best guy in the draft falls to them at 12. Like, to me, it's so fascinating that not only does the fate of these billion-dollar franchises come down to luck at what pick you get, but also depending on who, like everyone, the mock drafts you see on Draft Express and on SI and on whatever, those are really just projections that what like people like myself, my friends in the industry, are hearing teams saying, and they're trying to get. No one knows. So the Kings had no idea Tyrese Halliburton was going to get to them. So the fact that it all stems from the chance of what pick you're going to get, and then a random crapshoot of how everyone else slots your guys. Someone you think you're going to get goes way earlier than you. Someone you think you have no shot at is going to come fall down to you. It's so fascinating to me. And a big portion of the book just like takes a full autopsy onto the pre-draft workouts, the trade conversations. And like, as we're going down the clock, I kind of take you behind the scenes of like what they're thinking about, which player they're deciding on between, because these decisions change, you know, the next 7 to 9 years of a whole franchise.
Have you ever had the chance to, you know, sit in on a war room and kind of?
No, absolutely not. I
like,
wish.
Yeah, that would be. I was gonna say that would be like an interesting. Because like you said, like it's such a crapshoot, and you're always like, I look at, and you know, obviously you have the Eagles hat on. I think about like this is, and I swear someone needs to do a podcast. Like I talked to friends of mine, I was like, there needs to be a podcast about just sports, like what the fucks, like the Eagles would be a great topic. Like what just happened this year? Like who's at fault? Like what happened? How did this all come to be? How we get involved? How did Carson involved? Like, did they try to tank on purpose? Are they trying to get rid of Carson? Like, there's so much like conspiracy behind a lot of these sports things. It's like sports conspiracy is like crazy, but I think because, like you said, with all the tanking and because it's such a business now, that there's going to be all these conspiracies because there's going to be some backhanded backroom wheeling and dealings going on.
The other reason why there's so many conspiracy theories, I think, is because sports really is just like your regular office job, where there are people who have egos and, you know, don't get along with each other for whatever reason, and those things drive decision making in the sports realm just like they do in a typical office workspace, right? Like take Carson and Doug Peterson, for example. You know, it's reported that their relationship is like fractured beyond repair, yada, yada, yada. It sounds so dramatic. You can like write it, you know, we knew this was coming. That's because like this stuff is real. And like there's pressure from ownership to make decisions, and there's pressure from for like a lot of times when a coach and a executive meet like to discuss the future of the franchise, both of them know their jobs are on the line, right? So things get done because of a lot of ulterior motives to help people survive in advance, pretty much. And you have guys who know at the end of the day like a GM knows their reputation is gonna be on the line. So if they're disagreeing over some people to pick, a Jalen Hurts over something, or like the Kings in 2013, they had the number 7 pick, and they were like they went in like, we're taking CJ McCollum. We are going to take CJ McCollum. He's going to be the all-star point guard paired with DeMarcus Cousins. This is before he left.
Yeah.
What CJ McCollum became, right? He became a legitimate all-star caliber player. If he did get paired with Boogie, like, who knows what would happen in Sacramento? But they made one condition, I guess, before that was happening. They said, if Ben McLemore is still there, we're going to take Ben McLemore over CJ McCollum.
Yeah.
And Pete D'Alessandro was the GM at the time. Like, that's on him, right? So like, if he has an argument or a debate with people in his front office, in his war room, he's going to ultimately, like, that's when we talk about final say and stuff like that. Like, that's what I'm saying. These conspiracy theories, they're based off reality. He's going to pick the guy that he wants to go with because it's on his record. And he really wanted Ben McLemore, and look what happened. They didn't get CJ McCollum. There's other mistakes that happened along the way, and that whole franchise is continuing to sputter. So it's just, I think the conspiracies and, like, you asked me like what would happen in a war. Like, we know what happens in a war. Like, it is exactly what you think it would be, which is pretty funny.
So, kind of going like the whole fan aspect, how much do you think that plays a role into tanking? Do you think that, what are the fans going to think? Are the fans for it? Like, do you think that plays a huge role in the owner's mind or the GM's mind or the coach's mind to be like, we need to get better? Because I know guys like Spike Eskin, with rights to Ricky Sanchez, they're real big into the tanking era. Yeah. So they were like huge into it. So like they got this whole fan group to like really get behind it. Yeah. Do you think that's like the fans play a big role in whether this will work or not?
They do, for sure, especially because I think it depends on what ownership's goals are. There are a lot of owners who just want to have the team because it's like a fun thing to do. Most elite fraternity in the country, pretty much. And you get courtside seats, and you look really cool on national TV when they pan to you, sitting courtside, and yada, yada, yada. And some guys are in this because, like, they think it's a good asset, and they, like, they don't want to ruin it. They don't want to go broke doing it. And a lot of teams do have mandates to make the playoffs because they need that gate money to be able to keep the ship afloat, pretty much. And you have owners who also just, like, don't want to be considered losers. Like, they want to be considered people who make the playoffs and have a team that's always in that postseason picture. So you look at, like, the Bucks when they were really bad. Remember the Bucks finished with a worse record than Philly one of those years?
Yeah.
I think it was the first year.
Was that when they drafted him? Because Embiid went 2, right?
Yeah, Embiid went 3. So the Bucks had the worst record that year. They had a number 1 odds, but they fell down because the Cavs jumped up to number 1 when they took Wiggins. So the Bucks.
Yeah, it was sorry. Was it Wiggins, Parker, and then Embiid?
Yep.
Damn.
Yeah. Which, if you look at my book, No to Lose, coming out May 4th. I do a whole. I mean, I got literally everything about the whole decision making from Wiggins, his training with his trainer Drew Hanlon out in LA. Embiid, he had this crazy workout with Wasserman, and so did Jabari Parker. And then he, like, hurt his foot, visiting Cleveland. I mean, he was going to the Cavs. Like, he was going to be the number 1 pick without a doubt. And went out with Cavs brass. He was like, he made 14 straight 3-pointers or something like that. In the court. I mean, at the time he was like 18, barely to play basketball, or 19, I think, 7'2", draining threes. You talk about how you could feel yourself being on the precipice of the end of your plotting big man era. No offense. And you see this guy, he's super athletic, he's tearing down the rim, he's launching threes. He goes out to dinner with the franchise brass, and he's like making them laugh. Yeah, they have this assistant coach Jordi Fernandez who's from Spain, and he told me like it's one thing to be funny, another thing to be funny in your second native language. It's like hard to do that.
Yeah,
And Beats
that's
hilarious.
very true.
He's got this personality that you can put a franchise on those shoulders, like we're seeing in Philly right now.
Yeah,
The guy until he got hurt, until he broke that foot. And there's those little things like Jabari Parker. You know, there was a whole talk that he tanked his workout in Cleveland. Remember, because he theoretically wanted to go to Milwaukee. He was closer to because he was a Chicago kid. Everyone said he tanked the Cavs workout because he wanted to go to Milwaukee instead. But I heard that the Cavs had even red flagged him because of a knee or a foot. I forget. I have to go back and I got to start refreshing myself on my own. He had a lower body injury that the Cavs red flagged. So like they wouldn't have picked him either. So they had to pick Wiggins. Like he was the only guy that they really could take because like we talked about with the Kings, you know, your record comes down to the GM and the number one decision maker. And you can't take a guy that your medical staff is deeming as, you know, a question mark because your ownership needs a guy to be the guy. They need an Embiid. They need the tanking to be worth it. So all that stuff just comes down to these little tiny behind the scenes things.
It's so crazy. Just the amount of, like you're saying, like there's these medical things, like a tiny little foot injury. Could this be potential? I mean, you're talking about an 18-year-old kid. Like I broke my ankle when I was in second grade. Like people get hurt. And you're so young, you should be able to bounce back. But these little tiny things like become red flags. Like, will he be hurt? Like, we don't know. He's so big, and you almost talk yourself out of picking, you know, superstars because you're all these little tiny concerns and these analytical things that come into play.
Yeah,
like crazy.
I mean, I think a lot of it also comes down to the old cliche in sports, or maybe it's not maybe it's only among people who played. Not to say I was like a player, but you don't want to play you don't want to play not to lose. You want to play to win, right?
Yeah.
Like in the draft, a lot of mistakes are made because you're trying not to fuck up.
Yeah.
You're trying to pick the guy. Like you're trying to either find someone that's at least not going to flop, or you're trying to swing for the fences and land like the next Giannis at number 15 and the next Kawhi at number 10, instead of just taking the guy that you really think is like the guy that you need or want or should get at that time. I think a lot of those mistakes just come down to overthinking it.
It's crazy just to think about like the difference between the NBA, where you get, you know, you have so many eyes on you, and you talked about these guys are traveling from here to here, all these potential draft picks, and half of them could be, I mean, there's a guy, I forget his name. He was in the second round this year. He's playing in Australia now, just made his Australian debut. And it's like all of these guys, like there's so much analytics. There's so many people watching. And then when like to go overseas, it's like a completely different game. It's like there's so much, it's like such a crazy thing how much trust is overseas, because like they'll watch like 10 minutes of film on you and be like, talk to your agent and be like, hey, will he do? And be like, yup. Be like, send him over. And it's crazy, like how much trust they have in like these agencies and guys like that, where it's just like, I'm going to offer this guy $600,000 a year. Like, will he do this? Yup. Okay, send him over. It's crazy, like the trust that is built in overseas.
Yeah, I mean, the dialogue with representation over there is so seamless, like you said. I mean, the Kristaps Porzingis, you know, was a big name that people wanted potentially Philly to grab.
Yes.
Off the 2015 draft when the Sixers took Okafor. You know, the Magic were sold. They loved Porzingis. The year before in 2014, they wanted him to stay in the draft. Remember the Magic taking Elfrid Payton? Took Dario.
Yep.
And the Sixers traded Elfrid Payton for Dario. That number 12 pick that the Magic took Dario at, the Magic promised Porzingis. They said, stay in the draft at 12. Like this is the level of conversation these teams are having with representation now. Saying, stay in the draft. We're going to take you at 12. And he didn't want to. He wanted to stay in Spain. He really thought, and his agents, this is by their design too, they really thought one more year in Spain, move up a level, really show yourself, fill out your body more, you could become a top 5 pick. That's what he did, obviously. And the Magic, again, they came up in the lottery. You know, we talked about it at the top.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it comes down to chance and things falling in place for you. The Magic fell to number 5, and Porzingis went 4 to the Knicks. They promised him, we're going to take you to 5. And he went 4 to the Knicks. But they were in such dialogue with him. It's crazy.
The unicorn. I mean, it's and these dealings are it's crazy. And you just like, I always compare everything to overseas basketball because, like, you know, and obviously there's a, like, you know, when they have this trust factor, but at the same time, you know, these guys can be released like that. It's just like, hey, well, this guy do this, and it costs the team a plane ticket in like a month, and they're like, screw it, and you can just be replaced. But it's interesting to see how the NBA scouts kind of scout over there, like how they're doing and how they find the Luka Doncic and how they find the Porzingises and how they find, you know, like the Dirks, which was pretty much that one that really, I mean, there was like the Detlef Schrempfs and the, you know, Sabonis and stuff, but like Dirk was like the one where they were like, it's like they went out and found that diamond in the rough. And that was like not an, I know that got like a lot of scrutiny. I mean, that draft was ridiculous. It was the Kobe draft, but like, you know, going out and finding a guy who's so talented overseas has to be like 10 times harder than doing it in America.
Yeah, I mean, I remember talking to Daryl Morey one time for a story about Clint Capella, and
that's a good one.
The first time we tried to see him, he like, I don't know what country he first flew into, but it's a country that bordered Switzerland. He like went to see a game there, then got in a car and drove 7 hours to see Clint Capella. He shows up there, and Clint Capella's not playing that game. So he had other guys he wanted to see, like in France and somewhere else, and he like changed his itinerary because he really wanted to see Clint Capella. And he like had this little dinky rental car in the middle of nowhere, Switzerland, and he stayed around to watch their next game, and Clint Capella didn't play. So he looked at his phone, and he saw like that team's schedule, and he saw they were going to be playing a team that he needed of a team in France that he had skipped. So he just like configured his itinerary to go watch them in France and see Clint Capella play. Scout that other guy, 2 birds with 1 stone, and Clint barely played that game too. So, like, chasing him around Europe trying to find him. And he like, this is a guy who's making millions of dollars.
Yeah, that's what to say. Yeah,
driving like a little Volkswagen around the countryside of Europe, trying to find this random 18-year-old kid who, I mean, he ended up being a guy they gave $80 million to at one point. But like the overwhelming majority of the time, you're driving to some high school gym, you know, basically that fits, you know, 3,000 kids, and the player sucks too. Like, not that he doesn't play. You invest all this time and resources to get there, and he's not worth it. Like that's what it's like. It really is crazy.
It's so funny just to, like, hearing you talk about this. It's so much like, in the college recruiting process has changed so much. I mean, a lot of assistants, like I think back of when like 98 when I was playing, and like all the head coaches were there. Like I'd seen Gary Miller, and Maryland coach, going and watching this guy, Danny Miller. And like, there was a lot of like head coaches, Jay Wright, you know, when he was at Hofstra, you know, there was like all these head coaches would go and watch you play. Now it's not like Krzyzewski's not going to anything. He's just going to go and send his assistants and be like, okay, is this guy good? Good. Bring him in. And it's like, that's what it reminds me of. Going to that like college, old school college, where like these ridiculously talented coaches, Coach K is driving to, you know, Haddonfield, New Jersey to go see Brian Zubek playing like this tiny little gym, because that's what you had to do then. And now it's like, you know, it's a different game. But I think that's what, you know, some of these GMs are dealing with still, to kind of find those diamonds in the rough overseas.
I was actually just talking about Haddonfield Gym the other night.
The thing was so small.
I watched the movie 17 again with my sister. You know,
oh yeah,
Efron movie.
Yep.
Their court is like Haddonfield's, where like it's the stands, and then it's like a straight wall, like it's kind of elevated, so it's like a cut out like bowl. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
It was so cool. I thought that was like the coolest court I ever played on, because it was basically like you were in like a fighting pit. Everyone down on it. Like, it was so clean. I thought that like that's like the sickest court I ever played on. It was
like we never played Haddonfield like in high school, because Haddonfield wasn't very good like when I was in high school. But then I played in a summer league. Like we had like almost like a pro-am summer league there, and there was like a lot of pro guys playing it. And we used to play, and it was like, this is a cool court. And then I went and watched Zubek play,
Yeah.
and it was like you were squeezed together, and it was such a cool atmosphere. It was like old school, like Indiana basketball in the middle of South Jersey.
In summer league, they have two. It's on the campus of UNLV, the Big Thompson Mack Center is like where they had the All-Star game in 07. That's like a legit like NBA arena. And then picture like behind the basket, you know, in like the very like back corner of the stadium on the concourse. Imagine that opened up to like another little court too. It's like a bandbox gym. It's called the Cox Pavilion. And it feels like an AAU championship type game where like the stands are packed. I was there in 2014 for Wiggins and Jabari Parker. They played against here. And this is when they were like still hyped. Like they were not the bust that they're considered now. Like it was 1 versus 2, Wiggins versus Jabari, like in summer league. They're like holding people. Those types of courts are awesome when it's like a very I would rather watch a game in like a jam-packed 4,500 seat thing than a 20,000 seat stadium too. It's a different experience.
It is. Even like I love NBA, and I obviously watch it all the time, but like there is something to be said. Like even I've gone to like NBA playoff games, and it's exciting, but like it's not as exciting as going to like a, you know, like Pauley Pavilion or Cameron Indoor, like those places, just the energy, like even when you walk, it's like it hits even the Palestra, it hits you differently. And
I thought
it's like
about it a lot. I covered the NCAA tournament in 2016, I think, in Providence. It's like Dunkin' Donuts Center or something. It's where Providence plays. I think it only sat like 9,000 people. I'm like, I'd gone to the NCAA tournament a lot at the Wells Fargo Center growing up.
Yeah.
You could do those like 1 day pass. You could get like 4 games.
Yep.
And to see like a March Madness thing where like the bands are in there, the student sections are in there. They're like all from all over the country because there's like 8 teams there that day, you know, in a 9,000 seat stadium compared to a 15,000 or 20,000. That was like that energy from the tournament. That was crazy. Like I don't think it wouldn't have been as loud and like as intense. Like I remember Yale upset Baylor. Mekhi Mason.
Yes.
Again.
They
were like the 14 seed. They beat the 3 seed.
Yeah.
In this small gym, like everyone was. It was crazy. It was really, really cool.
So Jake, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, like the tanking stuff is like super interesting to me. So we'll have to get on again and like even talk more about this because especially so tell us when the book Built to Lose: How the NBA's Tanking Era Changed the League Forever. When does this come out? Where can tell us give us the deets.
Comes out May 4th. If you search Built to Lose, Jake Fisher, it's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble, it's on my publisher's Triumph Books. They have a website. It's on bookshop.org if you want to pay to support a local bookseller.
Nice.
So it's coming out then. So it's still a little bit of a wait, which is crazy because it feels like I've been working on it forever. But yeah, I'm excited about it. I've gotten some good feedback so far. It's got like pretty much. I tried to make it be. You're paying for it, right? So I tried to make it be full of stuff that people hadn't heard of before.
Yeah.
So whether it's like, Evan Turner, there was a story that Sam Hinkie drove Evan Turner to the airport after he got traded. Well, I talked to Evan Turner about it. Like I found out what happened. Like little things like that. Little stories like that from, the Pistons were on the clock in 2015 and they were deciding between Stanley Johnson and Devin Booker. And they picked Stanley Johnson because they thought he'd be better at guarding LeBron in the playoffs.
Oh.
And he did guard LeBron well one year, right?
Yeah.
They never got out of the first round. And Devin Booker's Devin Booker, So there's little stories of those interpersonal human things like Evan Turner and Sam Hinkie. And I have this great story. Like before that trade deadline, Evan and Spencer Hawes were trying to go to like Puerto Rico or some tropical vacation. I don't quite remember exactly off the top of my head. Right before the All-Star break and right before the trade deadline, right? Typically, it's like right after All-Star weekend.
Yeah.
And they got rained out. Their flights couldn't. They were desperate. They were trying to get traded out of Philly, as badly as they could. And then they're just trying to get out really quickly for a quick vacation. They were still stuck there by the rain. and they had girlfriends waiting for them. So the girlfriends had like the
Oh.
vacation, and they were just like in Spencer Hawes's house getting pissed drunk. And that's when Evan tweeted out. I don't know if you remember. He tweeted Spencer Hawes had Barack Obama toilet paper. Like I have the whole backstory to that little
Oh,
thing.
that's crazy.
Yeah, there's always little like interpersonal locker room type stories like that, ranging up from big backroom conversations for why a trade happened, why LaMarcus Aldridge, why his presentation flopped with the Lakers, and why the Lakers had a chance to get LeBron and Carmelo in 2014 and they blew it.
Wow.
Got info on that too. So I really tried to jam pack a lot of details, scenes, like actual dialogue that happened that people haven't heard of before. So I hope people like it, and I appreciate you giving me the platform to talk about it, man.
Jake, it's awesome, man. I'm super excited, super proud. Like this is going to be such a cool thing.
Thank you.
And I'm psyched to read it. So Jake Fisher, Built to Lose.
Thank you, man. And you're the next one. You're coming up.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, we're figuring that all out. Trust. Eventually, we'll both have them on a shelf, or like yours will be like in the front of the store. Mine will be like holding up a fucking table in the back.
We're gonna get it out there though. It's gonna happen.
Love it. Well, you rock, Jake. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this. I think it's really great stories, great stuff.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, Jake. Good times.
Yeah, man, I'm kind of excited to read some of those stories, because that's the stuff that I'm really into, is like those locker room stories about what happened and stuff like that. That sounds really interesting to me.
It's the human shit. It's like the human side of, and I love like that's like, and the behind the scenes stuff is like my favorite, which is why when I was talking to Jake, like that behind the scenes is like what, that's what everyone wants to see. That's why we have Instagram. That's why we have social media, because it was like, you didn't know anything. The Last Dance was the biggest show in history or series in history, because you got a glimpse into the behind the scenes of the best basketball player to have lived. So like, that's what everyone wants to see. And I love that. I love seeing like, and like he was talking about, like with trades and stuff, like I want to know what they were thinking. Like, what were they doing? Why did they think this way?
And we still wonder, like I listen to sports talk, not so much since we've been home, but normally when I'm driving every friggin' place, during the week. I listen to some of these big sports talk hosts, and everyone's just guessing. What is Howie Roseman thinking? What is Sam thinking? No one friggin' knows.
Yeah,
no one knows. But it sounds like Jake has the inside track on some of this stuff, and he's going to let the cat out of the bag with some of the stuff that he's learned over the years, and might answer some of those questions, like what really happened, with Turner and the coach.
and Spencer Hawes,
and fucking Spencer Hawes. Like I was always like a Spencer Hawes fan. I got to be honest. I was like, I like a big goofy like center kind of guy. You know what I mean? Like.
Heyo.
Right?
Yes, you do.
There's something special about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's something. Those guys are cool. Cool guys.
You always picture the center like Shaq. Like the specimen, like cool fucking like enforcer guy.
Yeah.
Like the Sixers had Spencer Hawes, and I remember there was a story just about like. Back when it was like it was the year they traded away Spencer Hawes. They were like cleaning shop. And they were in the playoffs, and I think it was Mike Missinelli was like saying like, who did they have ring the bell last night? And they were like, yeah, it was Spencer Hawes. And they were like, I don't know, like, or who was announcing the team or something. It was like Spencer Hawes. Spencer was like, no, dude, that guy was a beast. Like announcing the team, like everyone was the whole place was going nuts because Spencer Hawes was like announcing, he was on the mic or something. And I just remember like, that's cool. I like that when it's not what you expect.
Exactly.
One of those, and the backstories kind of fill that in, and then it makes the game that much more interesting.
Yeah.
When the stories behind the players and everything, it's not just 10 people on court running back and forth.
Yeah. Totally.
We really can understand the levity of certain games and situations. Agreed.
Well, this is a good time tonight, John. I feel like there's times when the hour goes by quick, and I'll look down and I'm like, oh shit, it was like 8:53, and I'm like, we have to wrap this up. Like
He has like 3 questions.
yeah, I was like, let's wrap this up. Hey, Jake, what do you think about Embiid? So this is awesome.
Also neat because he's a hometown guy for
exactly.
You know, like this guy's South Jersey born and bred. You know, and I always love to hear stories of success of others, especially coming from our area. So.
Agreed.
Yeah,
well, this is awesome. So again, thanks for listening, everyone, to the matchup zone. Jesus Christ. You
gotta get that right.
Yeah, seriously. One day I'll get it. Thanks for listening to Overseas Famous Podcast. Talking again tonight to Jake Fisher, or today to Jake Fisher. Excited. Good stuff. Keep listening, guys. And follow our social media at Overseas Famous and on Instagram. Check that out because we're going to have promotions running the next few weeks, give away free gear. So make sure you guys are listening, or logging into Instagram and following us so you can be part of that promotion. John, anything?
Yeah, man, I'm just excited. We got a lot of material starting to build up. Different interviews. We're kind of clicking on all cylinders now. Thanks to Michaela Hall for putting us on a frigging schedule. She was like, it's like the chore chart like that mom used to have on the frigging thing. I'm like, oh shit, I gotta do this today, like, or else mom's gonna yell at me.
It's so true. I think the same thing. I'm just like, okay, what do I have to do? And like that's what Michaela, social media, but she's also like, all right, on this day we're doing this, on this day we're doing this. And I'm like, okay. She's like, okay, let's set up a meeting here. I'm like, okay. So it's like that business sense, and like also that person to drive us, so we're not like, do you want to do a podcast in 2 weeks? And you're like, yeah, whatever, sure.
I gotta make dinner tonight. Nah, I can't make it.
Busy day. Good stuff going on. Awesome. Well, John, thanks. Thanks, DJ John Hunt. Thanks again to Michaela Hall. Thanks for Jake Fisher for joining us tonight. And this is Overseas Famous Podcast. We'll see you guys next time. Later.
Skinny pants and some Vans. Call me Triple A, get my advance in advance. Amen. As the world spinning, dance in my hands. Life is a beach, I'm just playing in the sand. Wake up and smell a. You can't see me, but never overlook me. I'm on the paper trail, and ain't no telling where it took me. Yeah, and I ain't a killer, but don't push me. Now tell me how you love it. You know you're at the top and on